Harmony. Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome back. We're going to start the day off today with an extraordinary young lady, Eller. Gosh, how can I put this? Here's what I want to try to get across to you guys, Well, here, it's a little different situation, but think about it. Think about all of the thousands and hundreds of thousands and millions of people that we probably see at any given year of our lives. We just walk past them on the street and look over at them in cars zipping by us and whatnot. But a lot of these people that we look at and we see, they're completely ordinary looking people. They're not famous, we don't know them. But yet, it is absolutely incredible how much some of them know. Yeah, and look, Eller is just like anybody, any of us. You wouldn't pick her out in a crowd for a moment, okay? I mean, she's a grandma, 3 grandkids. She's a nurse by profession. But the life she's lived and the knowledge she's garnered, we get a chance to share in that today because she's going to be willing to come forward and allow us to do that. This lady spent years with Alan Hynek. She has contact with ETs. She knows a whole lot about who we are, where we've come from, about what is being manipulated in front of and behind the scenes, about what we're allowed to think and why. And she knows a heck of a lot about what may be just around the corner. This is an incredible opportunity. Please welcome Eller.
Do I let him come on? Thank you very much, Bob. Appreciate it. Well, good morning. Now we're going to start off, it's Monday morning, we're going to start off with a test. So you have to listen very carefully, and we'll see how sharp you are this morning. Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson went camping. They pitched their tent and went to sleep. Sometime during the night, Holmes woke Watson and said, "Look up and tell me what you see, Watson." "I see millions and millions of stars, Holmes," said Watson. "And what do you deduce from that?" said Holmes. "Well, if there are millions of stars, and even if a tiny minority of those stars have planets, then it's likely there are a few planets like the Earth out there. And if there are planets like the Earth out there, then it means there might be life out there. And that means we are not alone in the universe," Holmes said. Holmes replied, "Very interesting, Watson, but what it means is that someone has stolen our tent." You're awake, that's great. Now, yesterday morning we heard from Neil Freer about Planet X and Anunnaki. And then we heard from Jim Nichols about Eisenhower and the aliens. Today, I will also be corroborating that story. And I think what's important is that it seems as though everyone this year is telling the same thing. So we know it's got to be true. Well, all truth passes through 3 stages. First, it is ridiculed. Second, it is violently opposed. And third, it is accepted as self-evident. The UFO enigma has passed through the first 2. We've been ridiculed and we've been violently opposed. But now we are being accepted. Now the entire world is beginning to wake up and realize what we have known for a long, long time. But there's a warning here. If you can't handle the truth, then please cover your ears, close your eyes, and go back to sleep. The truth is out there. And the truth is in this book, Dragon in the Sky. It's the truth as it has been presented to me. And my guide said finally this year when it was published, "You took long enough." There's been a 25-year gestation of this book. I feel like I've given birth. But in the last year, I was kicked into hyperspeed. This message had to get out, and it had to get out in a very timely manner. Well, who is Ann Eller? Well, I was a White House volunteer during the Clinton administration. I'm a nurse practitioner. I'm a school teacher. I'm a mother and a grandmother. I was secretary to the renowned astrophysicist Dr. J. Allen Hynek. And I'm a contactee and an author. This picture was taken on Bill Clinton's birthday on the South Lawn at the White House. And it was on a Friday. And the next Monday, he was going to be deposed in the matter of Miss Monica Lewinsky. So in this photo, I was saying to him, "Happy birthday, Mr. President, and good luck on Monday." His response was, he just kind of screwed his face up and gave me this sinister little grin and said, "Oh, that ought to be fun." In the early 1960s, I read the condensed version of Betty and Barney Hill's story. That was the first real abduction story that we all got involved with. It happened in September of 1961 in New Hampshire. When I finished the article, the author said, "Fact or fiction? I leave it to the reader to decide." My reaction was one of being totally incensed at that comment because I knew it was fact. I knew it was real. How I knew it was real, I didn't know. Well, what brought me to all of this was a period of 4 years of constant dreams of aliens and other worlds. It started in 1976 and went to 1980. The dreams consisted of being with aliens, being on different craft, seeing all different kinds of craft, all shapes, sizes, colors, all shapes, sizes, and colors of beings also. I saw different cultures. I was told about a dimension that was right over here that had another world on it just like the Earth, and that you and I are also on that other world in this other dimension. I even was able to pilot some craft, which was most exhilarating. My skull was opened by 2 ET surgeons for the purpose of changing my tapes. But when they got in there, they realized that those tapes that I had were permanent and they could not be changed. So my life had been pre-programmed and it was set. Certain things had to take place and they couldn't do anything about it. I had a dream about being in a chair like a dentist chair with a skull cap on and receiving a huge download of information. And during that procedure, I left my body and flew out into the universe and was actually shown inside heaven. There was an actual designation of heaven in an actual physical place in the universe. It was the most beautiful experience of my entire life. The words cannot describe the beauty and the bliss of this particular place. So if we're going to heaven, we just need to be real happy about that. There were lots of babies and pregnancies in my dreams, and being an OBGYN nurse practitioner, that didn't surprise me. I thought, well, okay, of course I'd be involved. But what I was involved in was the actual hybrid breeding process that the Zetas were carrying out at the time. One of the most significant dreams was being picked up onto a ship with a lot of other people. It was like we were refugees in this ship. And we were all standing in this one area watching a very large monitor. On the monitor was the Earth, and we were watching it tip and turn and wobble and wiggle, and all of a sudden, it fell over on its side, and the ocean sloshed out into space and then sloshed back again across the planet. We couldn't believe what we were seeing because we knew that no one could have survived that. Well, these dreams made me crazy. You know, in Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Richard Dreyfuss, how crazy he got, building Devil's Tower in his mashed potatoes, and so I felt like that. And I started reading everything I could find about UFOs and aliens. In every book, every magazine, every periodical I picked up, there was one name that kept reoccurring, and that was Dr. J. Allen Hynek. So who was Dr. J. Allen Hynek? Well, he was a very quiet, very soft-spoken man. But you know the saying, still waters run deep. That describes Dr. Hynek. He was the father of UFO research and a scientific advisor to Project Blue Book, Project Sign, and Project Grudge. He was founder of CUFOS in Chicago, the Center for UFO Studies, and IQ4 in Scottsdale, Arizona, the International Center for UFO Research. He was the scientific advisor for the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and he actually had a little cameo part at the end of that movie. You remember seeing the professor walk forward to get a better view in the front row at the end? That was Dr. Hynek. He loved working with Dr. Spielberg, or with Mr. Spielberg. And just an interesting aside, I saw the contract that he signed with Spielberg that gave Spielberg permission to use the term Close Encounters of the First Kind, because it was Dr. Hynek who had coined that, for $1,000. And he could use it throughout the universe. Thought that was interesting. He was the dean of ufology. Now, these pictures are old pictures. The top one's up there with his pipe. Was so typical of him. That pipe went everywhere he went. And the young lady in the bottom pictures with Dr. Hynek is none other than our own Paula Harris. Paula is an investigative reporter, and she describes herself as the Barbara Walters of the UFO scene. And I think that's very, very appropriate. Paula and I share a fondness for Dr. Hynek. We both cared a lot about him. So I sent a letter to this man that was showing up in everything I read about my dreams. I wanted to know why I was having these dreams. And they didn't seem to want to stop, and it had been 4 years. This was 1980. I wrote a letter and told him about them. I didn't hear a word from him for 9 months. And then one evening around 9 o'clock, the phone rang, and it was Dr. Hynek. Well, I was undone. He wanted me to know that he had just found my letter behind his desk on the floor. And after I got to know him a little better, that was so typical. He had a bit of the absent-minded professor in him. He was not at all interested in filing things away or keeping things in order. So he said he wanted me to tell him a little bit about the dreams, which I did, and he asked if I'd kept a log of them, and I said, well, sort of. He asked if I would send a copy to him, and I did. And then I never heard another word from him. He said he had a colleague in Sweden that was doing a research project on these dreams, and these dreams were worldwide. Many people all over the planet were having these dreams. Well, 5 years later, in 1985, I came home from the hospital one night. I'd been working the night shift, picked up the Phoenix paper, the Arizona Republic, and on the second page, here were the headlines. Dr. J. Allen Hynek brings UFO research to Scottsdale. I couldn't believe it. It was literally going to be in my backyard. The center was 5 minutes from where I lived. I couldn't get over there fast enough. So I went over. Nobody was around except people from different states, different cities had come to see Dr. Hynek and tell him about their experiences. He and Brian and Tina were downtown at a TV interview. These people were mingling all around this townhouse that was being used as a center. So I just kind of mingled with them and asked a few questions and found out that the principals weren't there, so I wrote a note and left it on the desk. I said, I have to be involved. I don't care what you want me to do. I'll volunteer my time. I'll take the cat out. I'll take the garbage out, whatever. But I had to be involved. And about 2 days later, I got a call from Brian, and he said, yes, come on over. You can set up the office. So I did. And it was about 2 weeks before I even met Dr. Hynek. He came walking in one day, and I introduced myself to him and said, maybe you remember I was the one that sent you the letter about the dreams. Well, of course, he had received thousands and thousands and thousands of letters. But he was very gracious, and he said, oh, yes, 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 I remember. Of course, he did not. This photo is of us signing the document that put IQ4 into being, the International Center for UFO Research. That's me on the left, Dr. Hynek, Tina Choate, and Brian Myers, who they were very instrumental in talking Dr. Hynek into moving from Chicago. And then the man in the back was the attorney that had written up the papers. About 2 weeks later, Dr. Hynek called me and said, would you be interested in coming to be my assistant? He said, I need help. He was expecting the moving van any day, and his office was going to be in his private home in Scottsdale. He said, I can't pay you much. I can pay you $100 a week. Well, I was making a couple of $100 a day at that point. But nothing could have stopped me from taking the job. So I quit nursing and went to work for him. He said that they were looking for funding, and once the funding came, I would be paid a regular salary. Now, there was a secretive side to Dr. Hynek. I kept asking him all the time because I knew he had to be having his own UFO experiences. I knew the aliens were not going to leave him alone. He, after all, was the man. He was at ground zero when anything happened having to do with the ETs. But every time I'd bring the subject up, he'd simply dismiss it, give me a little smirk, a little twinkle of the eye, and just refuse to talk about it. He was also a closet Rosicrucian. A lot of people didn't know that about him, but he was very devoted to the Rosicrucians. In fact, there was a full-length portrait of him in the living room, and on his hand he wore a ring that had the Maltese cross on it. He was very, very interested in spiritual matters and metaphysical matters. Even though he was a true scientist, he knew these other things were very valuable. There were times when he had trouble swallowing the other side, though. When he turned 75, I gave him a birthday party, and I gave him the book, The Path of the Masters by Dr. Julian Johnson. And he literally devoured that book with highlighter in hand, and he made comments in the margins, and he had question marks at certain places. We had many, many spiritual discussions, the two of us. He kept a secret coded notebook. Now, I was very surprised when I came across this item. It was one day when I was cleaning up the office, and I was always cleaning up the office, it seemed. This notebook was lying face open on the bookshelf, and I came across it, took a look at it, and it looked like Morse code. That's the only code I've ever seen, so to me it looked like that. It was a lot of dot, dot, dashes, but there were other symbols also in the code, and there was an entry for every day, and it was current. And I thought, why in the world would he be keeping a coded daily notebook? And then things started going through my mind, like, was he walking both sides of the street? Was he a double agent? Once an operative, always an operative? He was very secret. And we'll talk a little more about that a little further on. I found a few things besides that when I was working in the office, and one was an unopened letter, which I saw peeking out of a book, and so I took it out. It had never been opened, and it was postmarked in the early 1950s. It was addressed to Dr. Hynek, and the return address on it was an Asian name of a man, Ohio State University Astronomy Department. And I thought, well, this is just so typical that he got this letter back in 1952 and he hasn't even opened it yet. So I was the secretary, I opened the mail, so I opened this. Well, good grief. I nearly fainted when I read it. It was documenting that this particular Asian man at Ohio State University Department of Astronomy was receiving intelligent signals from the vicinity of Venus. And it hit me that Dr. Hynek knew exactly what was in the letter, that he was simply holding this letter for that particular person, documenting he had discovered this in case somebody came along later and claimed to be the first one receiving these signals. And you know, this was 1985, and I'm thinking, in 1952 we were receiving these signals. What was SETI all about? And when you think of all the money that was poured into SETI year after year after, oh, we're looking for those aliens somewhere out there. Well, anyway, then I didn't know what to do with the letter. I thought, oh, God, you're really in trouble now. So I took it to him and I apologized, and he did not say a word. He simply took it and put it away, and it was never spoken of again. I also saw a list of the original MJ-12 group. Jim talked about that yesterday. Majestic 12 came into being by an executive order of President Truman. The committee was formed to find out just what this alien agenda was all about. And the members were from the highest levels of the military and the national security. And we heard a few of the names yesterday. I'll mention just four: James Forrestal, Secretary of Defense; General Hoyt Vandenberg, Director of Central Intelligence; General Nathan Twining, Commander of Wright-Patterson Air Force Base; and Dr. Donald Menzel, who was the director of Harvard's observatory. Now, you remember from yesterday, it was General Nathan Twining who said we need to form a government within the government, something that will stay from administration to administration. He also wrote a memo in 1947, and that memo said, he declared that flying discs were real and not visionary or fictitious. This is in 1947. It's taken us a long time to get to this information. I also wanted to mention the Billy Meyer case because you're familiar with that. He's the farmer in Switzerland who has the ongoing encounters with the beings from the Pleiades, and he has thousands and thousands of pages of information given to him by them. It was the only major UFO case that Dr. Hynek was not invited to investigate. And because of that fact, he was very suspicious of it and of its validity. I, on the other hand, knew it was true. How I knew it was true, I didn't know. Hynek also listened to the tapes of Barney Hill when he was under hypnosis, reliving his experience as an abductee, and he was terrified. And Dr. Hynek said that just listening to those tapes terrified him. Now, swamp gas. This was probably the lowest point in Dr. Hynek's career. But in March of 1966 in Dexter, Michigan, the folks were seeing different colored lights in a swamp area, and they were describing a football-shaped UFO or a disc-shaped UFO, and these were very credible witnesses. When he arrived in town, he said there was absolute bedlam everywhere. It was very difficult to carry out the investigation, and the press was just hounding him. After all, he was the expert. He should know what this is, what's happening to us, what have we seen, so on and so forth. Because he was pushed into making a statement, he said, well, I can't rule out swamp gas. Well, that's all the press needed to hear. They took swamp gas and they ran with it. And that was the headlines all over. And of course, he was number one public enemy of Dexter, Michigan after making that comment, because it made them all look very foolish. And they knew it was not swamp gas. They knew they had seen an actual craft. And they wanted that validated. It was interesting, Jacques Vallée came to visit Dr. Hynek when I was there, and I met him. Nice guy, tall, good-looking, French. Who wouldn't like him? But anyway, he was telling me the story about swamp gas. And he said, as soon as Hynek made that comment, he got on the phone and he called him and he said, "Why didn't you call me? We could have put our two heads together and come up with a much better answer." Okay, well, here we are with Dwight D. Eisenhower again. He played a very crucial role in what happened to all of us, as we heard yesterday. I got the information from William Cooper. William Cooper was from Arizona, and I heard him speak. He was one of the original whistleblowers. He was a member of the intelligence briefing team for the commander of the Pacific Fleet, and he had access to highly classified documents. He knew right from wrong. He had the courage of his convictions. He was a great patriot. And he wrote the book, Behold a Pale Horse. Now, after he left the military, he had a radio show for a while. And President Clinton declared him, William Cooper, the most dangerous radio host in America, because he had information and he was telling us about it. He championed the cause of truth and freedom for everyone. And because of it, he was murdered outside his home in Eager, Arizona, and it was just shortly after he had sent his family out of the country for their safety. Many have come forth since that time to corroborate this story. And the story is that in 1954, Eisenhower met with the first group of aliens were Nordic. They were very human-looking, very highly spiritual beings, and he met with them at the Muroc Test Center, which is now Edwards Air Force Base. Remember that term, Edwards Air Force Base. They said that they would help us with our spiritual advancement. Now remember, they're talking to Ike, who's had a whole lifetime of military. We'll help you with your spiritual advancement. They refused to give us their advanced technology because they said that we were not mature enough and we would not use it for the benefit of mankind. They stated that we were on a path of self-destruction. And of course, Eisenhower, being a military strategist, when they told him that he had to get rid of all of his nuclear warheads, he thought this was not strategically, this was not the right thing to do. He felt that that would leave us as sitting ducks to anybody that might want to invade. And of course, that's how the military mind works. So he said, no, thank you. And they left. And then at another meeting, and this was shortly after in Holloman Air Force Base, he met with a group of Greys from Zeta Reticuli. I want to say something about the gray aliens right now. There are all kinds of gray aliens. In fact, the majority of aliens are gray to our eyes. They're different colors. They're out of our color spectrum, and we can't see the actual colors they are. This comes across as gray to our eyes. So, but when we speak of the grays, we're talking about this small little group of aliens from one particular part of Zeta Reticuli. But there are thousands of other groups of gray aliens that should not be lumped in with them, that have very positive, very wonderful feelings toward mankind. Well, anyway, Ike entered into an agreement with this group because they promised that they would share their technology, their advanced technology. And of course, that's what we were after. We wanted to rule the world. We wanted to have the best weapons. We wanted to have the most technology of anybody on the planet. And they agreed that they would not enter into any contract with any other nation on the planet. There were certain qualifications to this agreement. We agreed that they could abduct the people, you and I, for the purpose of examination, documentation, medical exams, monitoring. However, no harm was supposed to come to us, and we were to be returned to the point where we were picked up, and we were not to have any memory of these abductions. And then they promised that they would furnish a list to MJ-12 of all the contactees on a regular basis. You know, we were wondering how it was that the military and the government knew we'd been abducted. Well, here it is. Periodically, they had to give them a list of names. So this brought 60 years, 60 plus years, of alien U.S. military government cooperation. And it brought us places like Area 51, Dulce, New Mexico, Pine Gap in Australia. In fact, in Australia, there are supposed to be 10 top secret American facilities. In the UK, there's a whole bunch of underground U.S. secret facilities where a lot of mind control has been taking place. Over in the Gulf of Eden, I'm not sure how you pronounce that, is supposed to be a Stargate. Right now, there are lots of warships from many different countries patrolling the area, and there is a very large genetic project going on between ETs and humans under the water there in the Gulf. Now, shortly after I was there, Dr. Hynek received a summons to Edwards Air Force Base. He went and he came back, and he never told any of us what it was about. Shortly after, he was diagnosed with cancer. Now, if you're in this business long enough, you get very paranoid. And all of us were devastated when he had this diagnosis, but we immediately thought that it was a possibility that it had been induced. Well, it's something you can never prove. But we encouraged him to fight it with everything he had, which he did. He went to Barnes in St. Louis for special treatment, and then later he went to San Francisco for special treatment. He felt badly that he wasn't paying me more than $100 a week, so he offered a trip for me to go to Laramie, Wyoming, to the UFO Contactee and Investigators Conference in 1985, put on by Dr. Leo Sprinkle. And I was thrilled, and I couldn't get out of town fast enough. I met many great people at that conference. And my cosmic experience started at that conference. This is a picture of Dr. Leo Sprinkle and me in Denver this past September at the Galactic Conference. Leo is a very accomplished hypnotherapist. He had hypnotized many abductees, and he's a counseling psychologist. He's a contactee himself and a researcher. I decided to stay an extra day at the session after the sessions were over because I wanted to have my own personal experience with Leo under hypnosis. During the session, I was first introduced to my alien guide, who was a praying mantis guide. I knew that I had an alien guide with me, but I didn't know exactly what he looked like. And it started in 1976, and he would pat me on the top of the head. He pats me on the top of the head when something important is happening, when I need to listen up, pay attention, or sometimes when I'm just feeling blue and very alone, or like it's just not worth it anymore, I'll get the tap on the head just to remind me that he's there. The second thing that happened to me under hypnosis was that I morphed into a bird of prey and felt what it was really like to be a bird and to fly, and felt the wind in the tiny feathers of my face. It was a wonderful experience. I remember looking through the slits of the eyes and the bottom lids of the eyes going up and down. The third thing that happened was that Leo took me through 8 past life cycles for the purpose of identifying those qualities, strengths and weaknesses, the strengths that I brought forward into this life from those lives, and those things that weren't quite so strengthening, the weakened things that came into this life. What was interesting about that was that we came across a life with Dr. Hynek in the 1400s, the late 1400s. In that life, he was an astronomer. He had a telescope, and he saw spacecraft in the telescope. I was his assistant, and he allowed me to see the ships in the telescope, but he made me promise that I would not breathe a word of it to anybody, which was terribly frustrating for me in that life. It is carried over into this life, and that's why I'm doing what I'm doing now. I'm speaking out everything I know just to get it out there. And I thought, if we ever come back around again, I'm going to be the astronomer the next time. He can be the assistant. And I thought to myself, you know, history really does repeat itself. Well, now, this is just a sketch. I know it looks a little cartoonish, but this is just to give you an idea of what my praying mantis guide looks like. He's very wise, very intelligent, very kind, and he's with me today. Now, this is Doug and Connie Tipton. This is actually a picture taken in the dorm room where I was staying at the University of Wyoming during the conference, and they were the co-organizers of the conference. So I really didn't get to know them very well during the 3 days I was there, 4 days I was there, but all during the conference, I kept hearing about this ranch, Pat McGuire's ranch, and people were going out to the ranch. They were coming back with these wild stories about aliens and UFOs and weird and strange phenomena. So it really perked my interest, and I had to get out there to that ranch. Doug heard that I wanted to go, and he said, well, if you're staying an extra day, Connie and I will take you out to the ranch when you're finished with Dr. Sprinkle. So let me just tell you a little bit about Pat McGuire's ranch. The story goes that Pat had been trying to drill a well on his property for the ranch and could not find water. He'd had all kinds of dowsers out there. He'd had big companies with heavy equipment out there looking for water, and no success. So lo and behold, one day a UFO lands on his property. And the occupants get out and find Pat and tell him exactly where to drill for water. And he did, and he had enough water for the entire area. So that being very close in proximity to the university, we all thought we needed to get out there and experience what was out there. It seemed to be a power point where a lot of ley lines intersected, and there seemed to be a portal out there between dimensions. So as soon as I was finished at Leo's office, they were waiting to take me out. We got there and we crossed the property line. This is what it looked like, with mountains in the background, very scrubby, very uneven land. And we crossed over the property line, crossing a cattle guard, and the energy that hit us was unbelievable. It was absolutely dizzying. There was such a change in the energy. Well, we got out of the truck and we started walking. And all of a sudden, it seemed as though we were getting impressions. And down below was a whole herd of antelope. And all of a sudden, these antelope got spooked and started to stampede. And Connie said, "You see that? A ship has just come through the portal and has frightened them." Well, we were picking up the shape of the ship. We picked up 4 ships that were in the area. We couldn't see them. This was just a thing that we were sensing. About that time, I was hit right here in the center of the forehead with a beam of light that nearly knocked me to kingdom come. It was a pink light. I had my eyes closed and my arms out, and I felt as though I was being lifted off the ground. I felt as though someone was jamming a steel rod down the back of my neck, down my spine, and out my tailbone. Every muscle in my body began to shake and cramp, and I was like this. I felt as though I was being lifted off the ground and that Doug and Connie were miles away. The pink light, the cramping, the pain, the energy, all of a sudden turned to a bright, bright white. And a white ball of light exploded inside my head. And it was like sparklers on the 4th of July. You know, those sparklers going off all over inside my head. Well, during this time, and this was literally bringing me to my knees on the ground, but during this time, I had 2 very strong thoughts that went through my mind. One was, I'm going somewhere. And the second one was, we're changing souls. Well, I ended up in a heap on the ground. And the next thing I knew, Connie had run over to me and she said, "Are you all right?" I started to tell her what had happened. And I looked up at her and she said, "My God, Doug, come look at her eyes." The blue of my eyes was totally gone. My eyes were pure white, no color whatsoever. Well, it was a very powerful Kundalini type experience. And let me see, let's change here. Okay. About that time, we started walking some more. You know, it's like, oh, okay, well, I've just been hit with a beam of light and been taken up onto the ship, and God knows what's happened to me, but let's walk some more on the ranch here. So we were walking on the ranch, and all of a sudden, this huge storm blew up. The clouds, thick, thick clouds, lightning, thunder, and now torrential rain. I've never seen a lightning show like this. We ran back to the truck and we met up with another woman that wanted to ride back into town. And we sat for a couple of minutes and just watched this. This lightning was unusual. The sky was purple and gold and the flashes were incredible. The sun had just gone down, and so we started to take off our plan was we were going to go back into town, get dry clothes on, have something to eat, and come back to the ranch because we felt that the experience was not finished yet. Well, we got about 25 feet and ran out of gas. Now, Connie and Doug have had this truck for quite a while, and they've never run out of gas. But we were out of gas in the middle of this storm on Pat McGuire's ranch. So Doug had to go on foot to the closest farmhouse to get a ride into town to get some gas, which left the three of us women there in the truck in the middle of this gigantic storm. And during this time, I got this incredible urge every so often to close my eyes. Every time I closed my eyes, I was given a symbol. And I was given a total of 5 symbols. Well, about that time, he came back with the gas, and we went into town. We hit the last restaurant that was open. It was now 10:30 at night. The sun had just gone down, and now it's 10:30 at night. But it didn't seem unusual to us at all. We ate, and at that point, the rain was even stronger, and the idea of going back out to the ranch sort of left us. But it seemed as though we had to stay together because this experience was not finished. So we went back to the dorm. Let me just say a word here about the 5 symbols. The first one was a dragon flipping its tail in the sky. Very, very strong dragon in the sky. The second one was a trident with a 5-pointed star on the middle prong. The third was the jewel or the gemstone, the emerald cut gemstone. It was clear, so I thought, well, it's either a diamond or it's a crystal. And the fourth was the Maltese cross, and the fifth was an arrow pointing straight up. I had no idea what these symbols meant, but we were discussing them during the course of the dinner, and we were coming up with all sorts of ideas. But we went back to the dorm. I had suggested that let's not go back to the ranch in the rain. Come back to my dorm room with me. We'll stay up all night if we have to. But we'll just see if there's going to be anything else that's going to transpire. And we took big tubs of hot coffee back with us, had peanut butter and crackers later on. It was midnight when we got to the dorm, and we were just sitting around, the three of us, Connie and Doug and myself, talking about our experiences, talking about Alternative 3, all kinds of things. And all of a sudden, Connie's face began to change. And I was sitting about 6 feet away from her, and I looked at her. Doug wasn't paying much attention to her, and this face just kept changing. And I said, Connie, your face is changing. And she said, Doug, take my hand. This is going to be a heavy one. I had no idea what she was talking about. In came the most beautiful group of female aliens with huge eyes. These were round eyes. They were about 3 times the size of ours. They looked very human, as you can see, but they had an E.T. look about them too. They all had some kind of an ornament on their heads. One in particular had 3 feathers across her head, and she kept peeping in and out in between others that showed up. But there's Connie sitting on the floor, and from the waist up, she became these beautiful beings. And they spoke through her vocal cords. One of them came in and put up her hand like this in greeting, and when she did that, Doug and I both put our hands up automatically. Yeah. It was like, we didn't quite know what we were doing. but we were so undone by the experience. Another one came in and said, and they're all female, she said, "You desired to see us in the physical. We hope this will suffice." Another one came through and said, "You may now ask your questions." Well, a day ago I would have had 100 questions, but when you're sitting in the presence of these beautiful beings, all you want to do is just experience it. But I finally got my act together enough to ask them that stupid question that's always the first question we ask, "Where are you from?" As though we would know where they were from, even if they told us. But at that moment, there were two words in my mind. One was the long form, and one was the short form, like we would say Los Angeles or LA. She said, "That's correct. That word that's in your mind is where we're from." And at that moment, it was gone, and I've never been able to bring it back. I do know that they are interdimensional and they are extraterrestrial. Then one of them said, "We will now yield to a higher power." At that point, the center one came in. I couldn't imagine what a higher power was going to be like. But here came wisdom, ancient, ancient wisdom. She had too much skin for her frame, so it was in folds, similar to E.T., but she still had these round, big, round, beautiful golden eyes. She just exuded love. With the other ones that came in first, I had a feeling of sisterhood with them. I felt somehow connected with those beings. But when she came forth, it was like a teacher. This was a teacher, this was a mother. This was a very, very loving, important figure to me. And I asked her if she would stay with me. And she said, "We have always been with you." I also asked her what happened to me out on the ranch. And she said, "In your language, you would call it an initiation." She said, "You have been given higher or greater powers, and you will now be receiving communication directly." Well, I didn't quite know what to do with that information. I asked her if the mission was on track. What mission? I had no idea. But it seemed to be the question to ask. And she said, "Yes, it is, and it will be completed." This went on from 3 o'clock in the morning until 6 a.m. They left at one point so that Connie could breathe. And then they came back, and they put me through kind of an exercise so that I would know to recognize the tapping on the head, the ringing in the ears, and when to open my channel. Let's see here. I think we went one too far. There we go. Well, I went back to Phoenix a very changed person. And when I got back to the office, I made Dr. Hynek sit there for 2.5 hours while I recounted everything I could remember and put it on tape. And you can hear him in the background saying, "Well, did you see the ship? Did you touch the ship?" You know, this was the scientist coming out in him. He wanted that hardcore evidence. And he was the one that suggested that we had had a period of missing time during the time that we were on the ranch, and from the time that the sun went down until we arrived at 10:30 at the restaurant. Now, Dr. Hynek came in 1910. He was born. Halley's Comet, the year of Halley's Comet, and he knew all his life, he said, that he was going to go out when Halley's Comet came back around 76 years later. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened. And he died 76 years later in 86, the spring of 86, when the comet came back. During my last meeting with him, he looked me in the eye and he said, "I want you to know I have had my own UFO experiences." So I felt that was quite a present. Now, if any of you were here last year, you remember Marissa Ryan, the medium, who talks to people on the other side of the veil. Well, I contacted Marissa for the express purpose of seeing if I could be in touch with Dr. Hynek last spring. And sure enough, I do believe that we made a contact from several of the things that were said. But in that exchange, I asked him if he had walked both sides of the street, and he used the term double agent. He said, yes, I was a double agent. So he never left the military government position. When Project Blue Book went underground, that part of him also went underground. He also had a significant amount of fear because he was so close to the inner workings, the inner sanctum of this whole phenomena. That, and when I saw that fear in his eyes, when I came back from the conference, and someone had called him from the conference and told him what I had said in my speech. In 1985, I said to these contactees, "You are not crazy. The government knows all about your abductions, and the government is in cahoots with the aliens." Well, I got a standing ovation, but not from Dr. Hynek. When I got home, he was waiting at the door, and I got a slap on the wrist. He said, "You have no proof." However, I knew, and I didn't know how I knew. I asked him what he would do differently if he were to come back and do it over again, and he said, "I would be a much louder voice." And there were a lot of people that worked with him that wanted him to be a much louder voice. Now, in 1985, no, it was 1989, my guide told me to read Zecharia Sitchin's The 12th Planet. I was told that there was a very important message in that book for me. So I read it, and as you know, the ancient Sumerians talk about planet Nibiru and the gods that live on that planet, the Anunnaki, that came to the earth 300,000 or more years ago to mine for gold. That was too hard work for them. They didn't like the mining, so they decided to create a slave race that they called Homo sapiens. So there you know, that's how you were created. You were created in the image of the Anunnaki. The Anunnaki are our direct gods. But let me tell you one thing about that. There are all different levels of gods. These are the lesser gods. The Anunnaki are the lesser gods. Big Daddy is still up there. We still have the creative force at a much, much higher level than the Anunnaki. They created our bodies. They did not create our soul. But anyway, we've been sort of a slave race ever since. And this has been a prison planet. This is an actual photo of Planet X over on the right. The red, you see it shrouded. Can you see that very well? Okay. You see it shrouded with a red dust cloud, and that's a tail that it's bringing behind with it. In that tail, there are several moons, lots of asteroids, lots of hunks of planets and boulders and gravel, excuse me, all kinds of things. And we tracked the 12th planet, Nibiru. We've tracked it since 1983. It's 4 times the diameter of the Earth. It's 23 times the mass of the Earth. And it returns every 3,600 years. And at the closest point, it will pass us at 14 million miles. Now, that's not very far in cosmic terms, and that's a big planet. So we're going to reap the havoc. And these passages that come around every 3,600 years, there are different degrees of destruction, depending upon where it comes closest to the Earth, which side of the sun, and so forth. This, we're being told, is going to be one of the worst passages. That is the dragon flipping its tail in the sky, the first symbol I was given. These pictures are drawn and painted by David Dees. He's the artist. And this is how he envisions things are going to come down. The planet will be about the size of a big full moon when it's at its closest point. So everybody on the face of the Earth will be able to see it. And this is a tail spread out behind it that it's bringing along. This tail is thrown millions of miles away from the planet as it comes through. And so we are being pelted even now with some of the things that are in the tail. The fireballs have risen tremendously throughout the planet. I actually witnessed one coming down in Cottonwood, Arizona, it was probably about 6 months ago at this point. So there's the tsunami in the background, and in the second picture there is the flooding that's going to take place. You know, aren't we lucky? 3,600 years it takes it to come around when we chose to be here now. And we did choose to be here. We thought it was going to be quite exciting, and in reality it is going to be quite exciting. This photo on the left is the Ring of Fire in the Pacific Ocean, and all the volcanoes are going off at the same time. We're being told that every volcano that has erupted in the last 10,000 years is going to go off. You'll also see in the middle, there's the ripping of the crust of the Earth. On the other side, you see a huge planet. Well, it's not going to look that big to us, but there is a tsunami coming, and there will be a lot of flooding. But here's the good news, and there is good news. This is a beautiful young boy of the new hybrid race. He is half Zeta, half human. And this is what they're going to look like, and they're going to inhabit the new Earth. They're going to have greater intelligence than we have, a greater sensitivity, longer lifespan, and much less illness. And a couple of things that they were able to breed out, which I found interesting, is blind rage, number one. This race will not experience blind rage. And the other one was intestinal gas. I think the Zetas found that to be extremely distasteful. Life as we know it is changing. We are going through a transformation. We've been going through a transformation for several decades. Our bodies are literally being rewired. We're becoming galactic humans. Chakras, different power centers in our bodies are being opened up and activated. And the more our consciousness expands, the more spiritual we become. And we're learning that we are not alone in the universe, and this is a huge evolutionary jump. We're going to learn to love and coexist with our galactic neighbors. We are heading for the fourth and the fifth dimension. The planet is heading for the fourth dimension. The galaxy is also on the move, as is the universe. We're all going up, and we're all going into a new position. Life as we know it is changing drastically. Now, there are some spiritual preparations that we need to be about, and we need to be about them right now. We have no time left. Angels and guides surround every single one of us, and they are giving you information. They are giving you instructions. It's your job to get quiet, get centered, and listen to what they're telling you. And you'll feel it in your gut. And when you get that gut feeling, then you must act. If it's telling you to move, you need to move. And you need to not dally. You need to get going now. Listen to them and then follow your intuition. It's time for you to make peace with your own God, however way you envision your God. It's time to put your life in order. We have only enough time to tell our loved ones how much we love them and to ask for their forgiveness for any wrongs we've done them, and to also forgive those who have done wrong by us. Very little time. Many of us are going to leave the earth to begin our next incarnation. The important thing is to remember there is no death. You will drop the physical body, the spiritual body, the mental body, the emotional body, the soul, all lives on and goes to the next stage, goes to the next life. It's really quite exciting because we're going up. We're going to the fourth and fifth dimension. Carlos Barrios is a Mayan elder, and he said, "We are living in the most important era of the Mayan calendars and prophecies. All the prophecies of the world, all the traditions are converging now. There is no time for games. The spiritual ideal of this era is action. And the action right now is to wake up. We've been in a long spiritual sleep, and we need to wake up now." If you're going to survive through all of this, there's some things you need to be about right now. You need to be stocking up on food, water, and medical supplies. You need to know your neighbors, because don't expect a first responder to come and help you. There is going to be so much going on all at one time that you are going to be responsible for yourself and your loved ones. So take that responsibility. Choose your neighbors carefully. Locate out of the cities. Move 100 miles inland from any water, large bodies of water, or the ocean. Go to a higher elevation if possible, and prepare for a camper's life for many years. There aren't going to be any computers, no iPods, no Blackberries, no cell phones. I'm going to start from scratch again. But those people that do choose to survive are going to have the help of the ETs. They're not here to save us, but they are here to support us as we work our way through this transition. And they will be helping the groups of people who survive. These are your options. Well, you can go into spirit, which most of us are going to do. You can get lifted into a spacecraft. You can escape through a portal into another dimension. Or you can survive and stay on the earth and rebuild. Finding and seeing the 12th planet. This is an actual photograph of Nibiru and the sun. This was taken in 2004, 6 years ago. We've been seeing it for a long time. I actually saw this very shot in Sedona, Arizona in 2004. We first tracked it in '83, and the first time it was seen without a telescope was 2003, and it's most visible at sunset. This is not a figment of anybody's imagination. It's real, and it's here, and it's on our doorstep. These are some more pictures. These were at sundown or sunup, I'm not sure which. And these two shots, the one on the left from Sweden in 2006, and the one on the right from Poland in 2009. You see, it looks like we almost have two suns there, and it is known as the second sun. You can see it today, as long as there aren't chemtrails in the sky. That's one of the reasons for the chemtrails, so you can't see Planet X. The government, the military, the Illuminati, the cabal, all of them have known about Planet X for a very long time. They have their bunkers all ready, and they will go to these bunkers, or they're going to go off planet. They have the capability of leaving the planet and going anywhere in our solar system. But you and I don't have a ticket. And they're going to be well guarded so that you and I can't knock on the door and be invited in. It's not the end. It's a new beginning, because we're going to higher and better and more wonderful places with more wonderful experiences. It's something to really look forward to. I want to give a special thanks to Nancy Leader of ZetaTalk.com. Nancy loaned me these photographs to show you of Planet X. If you're not familiar with ZetaTalk.com, get familiar with it right away. It is an absolute encyclopedia of truth. Google it. Do yourself a favor, ZetaTalk.com. David Dees was the artist here. If you need any artwork, he would be happy to talk to you. And I want to thank Paula Harris. Paula's been very instrumental and very helpful to me in bringing this message forward and promoting the book. So if you want to learn any more, you're invited to read the book, and Dragon in the Sky, Prophecy from the Stars. We have only 2 minutes remaining. I was hoping we'd have at least 10 for questions. But if there's anybody with a very pressing question, please come up to the microphone. Thank you.
Thank you for this wonderful talk. Tell me, when should it happen? Do you have a time frame on it? No?
Pardon?
Do you have a time frame? When will it happen? In the next year or so?
There's not an exact time, but I wouldn't put anything off if I were you. I think it's going to happen before 2012. And we're in 2010 right now. So it's time we need to be about getting ready.
Okay, and you say, so when you live 100 miles away from the ocean, then you have a chance.
Yes, the further inland you can get from large bodies of water, and the higher you can get, the safer you will be. I remember someone telling us at a conference years ago that you need to be 9,000 feet, but I don't think you need to be that high. But there are going to be a lot of challenges.
So where did you move to?
Well, I'm living in Sedona, Arizona.
Oh, I used to live there.
But I am not planning on being one of the survivors.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you. You got the opening here? Thank you.
I'm Bob Brown, and I'm a founding director of the International UFO Congress. I can't tell you what a pleasure that it has been to host the International UFO Congress over the past 19 years. I have been blessed with the opportunity to meet and work with the best people on the planet during these years, and to do my small part in helping to discover and archive some of the truth about the UFO phenomena for the benefit of all. I've enjoyed and treasured my role with the Congress, but at the conclusion of this year's event, I will be passing the baton. I am pleased to announce that Open Minds will be taking over the huge responsibility of producing the 2011 International UFO Congress. Now, this exciting transition comes at a meaningful time in the Congress's history because next year we achieve the monumental milestone, our 20th anniversary. Again, thank you to all of you for allowing me to serve you throughout the years, and I look forward to seeing you again at upcoming events. Up next is Alejandro Rojas to explain some of the exciting things that Open Minds has planned for the future of the Congress. Alejandro?
Thanks, Bob, and thanks to you and your family for all of your hard work to make the International UFO Congress the most popular conference in the UFO community. All of us here at Open Minds are well aware of the huge shoes that we have to fill and the amount of work that it'll take for the continued success of the conference. It's our hope to grow the conference while maintaining the high level of integrity that the Browns have worked so hard